Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome members and the public. Just go through a few basics. In case of fire alarm, you exit the doors and the building, making your way to the far end of the car park. Mrs. Hoare is our fire marshal, so you would follow her and any instructions. If in doubt, toilets are just outside this door and down the corridor on the right, and water is available in the mezzanine. This is a public meeting and members of the public are welcome to come and listen to the debate today, but unless registered as a speaker, you're not able to take part and speak. We're live webcasting today, so can I please remind the members to use their microphones and remember to turn them off when not speaking. I'd now like to ask the officers and the committee members to introduce themselves. Start with Rick, please. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Jeff Moody, Tavistock North.
Good morning, everybody. Councillor Graham Reid, Tavistock North.
Councillor Tony Leach, Oakhampton North.
Councillor Neil Jory, and the member for Milton Ford Ward.
Sam Wakeham, Councillor for Hatherley.
Alistair Cunningham, member for Buckler Monacorum Ward.
Caroline Mott, Bridistow Ward.
Terry Southcott, Bridistow Ward.
Elliot James, the case officer for this application.
Pat Weimer, head of DM.
Steve Guthrie, Drew Stainton Ward Councillor and Chair of the Committee.
Rich Edel, Buckler Monacorum Ward.
Cathy Hall, Democratic Services Officer, West Devon.
Catherine Bowen, Legal Officer to the DM Committee.
Can you hear me?
That's right.
I'd like to go through apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies for absence?
We have no apologies, thank you, Chair.
Any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest? Are there any items brought forward from the minutes? No items, thank you. Any urgent business? And confirmation of minutes, please. Just show of hands, please. Licensing application first, please. We need to approve correct as a record the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of May for the licensing subcommittee and the meeting held on the 3rd of March and 26th of May.
Excuse me, Chairman, please could you put the microphone directly in front of you?
Is that any better?
The problem we have, Steve, sorry, Councillor Guthrie, rather, is that we've got fans above and it's not carrying quite as...
Thank you. I will speak up.
Thank you.
We have a show of hands for confirmation of minutes, please.
I'm happy to confirm for the 26th of May, Chair, but as I wasn't at the 3rd of March meeting, I'm unable to confirm those.
Thank you. And could we have the legal and advisory statement, please?
Yes, Chairman. Just a quick whirl through for the benefit of the public who are here, how these decisions are arrived at the planning committee. Let me bring this a bit nearer before anybody says anything. Regard must be had to the development plan policies and other material considerations, and the planning officer will go through those. Material considerations are those about developments or use of land. Decisions should be taken in accordance with the development plan unless other material considerations suggest otherwise. And we must establish whether the development proposal complies with the development plan read as a whole. If there are conflicting policies, there is a balancing exercise to be had involving planning judgment, which the members will apply. And the final comment is that the development plan policies must be read sensibly. Words have their ordinary and natural meaning. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. We will now go across to the planning officer for his statement on the agenda item. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you, Chair. Can everyone hear me okay? Is that coming through? Brilliant. So the application today is 056926HHO, which is 22 Churchill Road in Whitchurch. The site location plan is on screen now, and it shows that the property is a detached dwelling towards the end of the cul-de-sac of Churchill Road in the village of Whitchurch, just on the edge of Tavistock. The satellite imagery shows there that the main Whitchurch Road runs through the village, and Churchill Road is an offshoot of that, so fairly central within the settlement, surrounded by similar dwellings. So the existing elevations of the property show a detached dwelling with 3 upstairs bedrooms, a garage that sits forward of the dwelling and projects out to the front. The property is slightly set down from the road other than the garage, meaning that it's quite unassuming in terms of built form. It's not a particularly sort of substantial property from the street scene. It sits in between a row of 3 that are all of that same design, with the garages projecting to the front. And these are the proposed elevations, which show that the proposal is for a first floor extension over that garage projection that comes no further out but sits directly on top of its footprint, as well as a small additional extension to the porch and the front reception room over to the left-hand side of that northeast elevation in the top left, creating 2 new gables, one larger, one smaller. The larger gable at the first floor extends somewhere between 0.9 and a metre above the existing ridge line. The smaller one is obviously lower than the existing ridge line. So there are the existing floor plans showing that flat roof garage slightly projecting to the fore of the property, and then the rest of the dwelling slightly set back and further down. With the proposed extension works all to the front, introducing the home office and ensuite at first floor and an extension to the existing playroom at ground floor, as well as an increase to the size of the porch in between the 2. And there we have the existing and proposed roof plans showing those 2 additions, with the larger addition on the left and the smaller single-storey addition to the right hand of that right-hand image, and the existing roof plan sort of shown over to the left-hand side there. So the site photographs up on screen now show that the property is one of 3 of the same house type. It is that middle one there with the van parked outside. The property is quite unassuming in form. As you read it, it reads as a row of cohesive properties, all with minimal alterations to those front elevations. They're all set slightly below the street, as you can see, meaning that they are quite recessed in character. And the introduction of a first floor extension above that garage, which comes between 0.9 metres and a metre higher than that ridge, will substantially increase the prominence of the property, drawing attention to it within that street scene, whereas it is currently quite subtle and unassuming. It will also introduce a substantial feature that goes against the existing design principles, introducing a large area of massing to that front that currently is not present and brings undue prominence. So in terms of the further site context, there are indeed larger detached dwellings within the street scene, both opposite and further down the road. However, these are all original. I could not find any planning history to indicate otherwise. The immediate properties are all that sort of lower set, smaller design. Larger detached dwellings are present within the street scene. However, the immediate context is that three that are all of the same form. There are no front extensions within Churchill Road, as far as I could find on the planning history of this sort of scale at first floor. And to give a bit of an idea, it's a very, very rough idea, but of the potential increase in mass, the small pink star/cross indicates very roughly where the extension will sit within the street scene, sort of indicating the additional massing will be at that sort of height and scale, whereas when one currently views the street scene, they're all, as you can see, quite set down, quite subtle, quite unassuming. It is the middle of that three again, which I think is quite an important fact. They are all quite, they are following the same form, and the middle one suddenly becoming substantially more massed and of a greater scale will interrupt that existing built form. So just for a little bit of guidance, the supplementary planning document of the Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan gives us some additional paragraphs to work with in order to determine front extensions, and 13.35 and 13.36 are the relevant paragraphs in this case. As you can see, they indicate that the front of the dwelling is the most visible part. It's the part that has the impact upon the street scene. As is the case here, it has that clear and defined building line, which does define the character of that street. And as also noted, 13.36 states that extensions projecting forward will generally be resisted, other than in the context of where there is no obvious building line, or where the property is set well back, or where the property is in a rural location, for instance, with no distinct street scene. In this case, we believe that the street scene is quite well defined. It's very clear that there are three properties of the same form, scale and location. There isn't really one of those caveats within this application or this site whereby it does not follow a distinct street scene. There is a building line. The property is no further setback than its two neighbours, and the houses there is no sort of rural location where no street scene exists. This is a residential street with similar properties. So the fundamental issues on this one, there is one reason for the recommendation of refusal that ties two elements of Dev 20, and that is both the impact upon that uniformity of the street scene and the public realm when viewed from the public vantage point, but also the impact upon the dwelling, the legibility and primacy of the host dwelling. This is a substantial front extension which does interrupt and mask the existing form and character of that property. The refusal reason is copied there if you want to just have a quick read of it as to how the recommendation has been reached and what policies were referred to. In this instance, it is both Dev 20 and policy SD1 of the Tavistock Neighbourhood Plan, which is their design guidance policy.
Thank you very much. Any questions, please, from the committee? Councillor Cheadle.
This is probably a bit semantic, but could you just pop back to the penultimate, the one with the two statements from the supplementary development plan? That one, yeah, 1336. Extensions that project forward of the existing house. This extension is on top of the garage. The garage is in front of the house. So is this an extension that projects forward, or does it not project forward because it's built on top of the garage which is already there? If that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So our interpretation of this guidance paragraph is that the property's bulk and primary sort of massing is the dwelling itself. They all do have those garages, which are, I agree, part of the properties. However, that is a single-storey element of the proposal rather than, the existing dwelling has a single-storey garage. This introduced a second storey. We would say that is definitely works to the, forward of the building line of the house rather than, the garage is present, but it's a single-storey structure. It's set down. This will introduce massing at the front that we think does follow that guidance in general terms.
Yeah. So your view is that it does project forward of the house?
Yes, we think so.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Thanks. Councillor Moody.
Thank you, Chair. And that was an interesting question, Councillor Cheadle. In your introduction, you mentioned that it's set in amongst, we're looking at street scene. That's what the whole concept is about. You mentioned that it was set within similar buildings. From the site visit, I presume what you mean is 3 of similar buildings rather than the entire estate, because on the site visit, we noticed that there was a conglomeration of different styles and shapes and sizes, so it was quite a mix. And I'm just interested in how you get to what your thought process was about the significance of 3 modest dwellings built in the 1970s with no architectural features that would reflect the vernacular of Tavistock, slate roofs and stonework and all the rest of it. How did you get to that position of those 3 individual buildings being significant in the street scene?
Thank you, Councillor Moody. So the reason that we reached that conclusion was that essentially when immediately standing to the front of the dwelling, you have 3 properties all of the same form. I do appreciate that obviously within the wider estate there are larger dwellings, there are taller dwellings, there are dwellings with clear 2 stories. However, when immediately reading the street scene as one traverses down it, these 3 dwellings form quite a neat line of properties, all of the same form, all of the same massing. They may not reflect the immediate vernacular of Tavistock itself, or of Whitchurch for that matter, but they do, in their own right, have a clear, defined form, character and structure that would have been the intention of the developer when built in the late 70s, early 80s. Obviously, it is, policy Dev 20 indicates you sort of you can take the character of the area to be the entire street. In this instance, we've taken those 3 properties as having that same form, and therefore judged that that is the immediate character of that element of the street scene. This one, obviously being the central one of the 3, is going to then fundamentally alter that character and appearance of those 3 properties. So that was the sort of assessment we made, and the reason being that those 3 properties are clearly the same house type off of a catalogue or spec sheet when originally built, and have formed that sort of end of the cul-de-sac in that way, rather than varying sort of between.
Thank you very much. I understand from local knowledge that apparently when this estate was built, there was no design as such, and people could buy off plan and select whatever style of building they would want. But that's just background information that I've gleaned from local residents.
Thank you. Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Chair. When we consider applications in this committee, particularly those that are of a larger scale, we're continually, I think, being impressed that we need to look at the harm that any development might bring and compare that to the benefit that any development might bring. I can see there are benefits within this application that do meet a number of the other requirements of the joint local plan around areas such as reducing travel, encouraging sustainable lifestyles, supporting digital working, reducing carbon emissions and improving work-life balance. And that, in that sense, a properly designed home office above a garage could be viewed as being a very positive benefit to the local economy. To what extent, in your considerations, have you weighed those sort of benefits against the harm that you've outlined under Dev 20 and an SD1 of the neighbourhood plan?
Thank you, Councillor Jury. So with an application like this, obviously the application is for householder permission, so it's alterations or extensions to an existing dwelling. We have no objection in principle to the extension and alteration of this dwelling. It does, however, have to be of a design standard that we consider to accord with Dev 20. In terms of other policies of consideration, when determining a householder application, design is very important, as the character and sort of impact upon the street scene has to be carefully assessed. Beyond that, the other key policy considered is that neighbour amenity. There has been no issue raised in this application. when looking sort of at further policies for the determination of a householder application. As I say, we have no objection to finding a scheme that is workable on this house and to allow them to extend in a manner that would give them the required space. We do, however, have to, design is important, and the design of an impact upon a street scene does have to be considered to a significant extent, and that is why the weight has been given to that policy in this instance.
Are you satisfied, Councillor Jury, with that? Thank you. Councillor Southcott, please.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the design of this, is it primarily the ridge height that is the problem with the extension?
Yeah, I think the fundamental issue with this application is the massing and scale of the right-hand front projection, so the first floor one. The fact that it comes up higher than the existing ridge means it is going to be a prominent feature within the street scene that does not currently exist, and therefore has that harm upon both the character of the dwelling and the street.
So if the applicant were to actually reduce the height of the ridge and maybe alter the inclination of the roof, a lower angle, would that be more acceptable?
Just need to remind you that we're dealing with the application.
Yes, I do remember that. So I'm just asking the question.
I think, Councillor, without seeing a detailed design of how that would work, because my feeling looking at the plans is that you would not be able to get a pitch roof that would accommodate head height over the garage because of the difference in levels between the property and the garage. I'm not sure that you could get something that would actually work unless it was a large, I suppose, box flat roof, and whether that in itself would be appropriate without seeing it in front of us. I think it's very difficult to answer that question.
Comment.
Thanks, Councillor Southcott. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, could I ask the officer to bring up on screen Dev 20 in detail, please?
We haven't got that as part of the presentation in Dev 20 in detail.
Yeah, so Dev 20 is the design policy that we use to assess the design of all sort of schemes. It includes sort of assessing the impact upon the dwelling itself, the character, the vernacular, the materials used, the historic context. All of these sort of matters come into Dev 20. It is the comprehensive policy that pulls together all design considerations for a proposal. Apologies, I don't have it in front of me or on my PowerPoint.
Thank you very much. Next question. The councillor who called this in says increased roof height is about 1 metre. Is that more or less correct? That's the total height of the whole building, of course.
Yeah, so the ridge height increases about 1 metre, yes.
So that's right about here. Doesn't sound an awful lot, does it? To be honest. Nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Reid. Councillor Reid. Further questions?
Yes, I have one further question. Has this whole development ever achieved any architectural analysis or awards? Does this estate actually have any interesting aspects as regards its total visual appearance as an estate?
I don't think any of the officer group was here when the estate got consent or was built, so I've absolutely no idea whether it had any awards at that particular time. Personally, after going through the site of the site, I think it's quite an attractive, pleasant estate to be truthful.
Could you bring up the picture which you showed her of other buildings on the site where there was a higher building built into amongst the others? That one there? That's on the same road, isn't it?
Yeah, so the left-hand image shows the opposite side of the road, and the right-hand image shows further down the road. So on the right-hand image, the application dwelling is just out of that image to the left, about sort of just outside of it, about here.
So the slightly up and down roof line along the whole street isn't going to change much by having one extra building with another metre higher. Do you agree or not?
So in terms of the higher street, as sort of in the presentation it was explained, there is a variance in the roof heights. However, the immediate character is those three at the end, which are all set down lower and of the same height. But as you say, yes, they do. There is variation beyond that, yes.
And have the next door neighbours complained, or are they supportive, do we know?
So there are 3 letters of support from some of the neighbours and no objections from any of the neighbours.
Any further questions before we move on? We have a list of speakers. We have no objector registered. And we have the applicant who is coming forward to speak, please. Thank you. Just to remind you, you will have 3 minutes from the time you start. Thanks very much.
Can everybody hear me okay? Great. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. We are asking the committee to support a modest extension that improves how our home works for our young and active family and provides an opportunity for me to comfortably run my small business from home. We are only the second owners of 22 Churchill Road, and in the 50 years that Mrs. Harris before us owned the property, many other houses on the street have been modified in some way. In terms of the row of 3, somebody needs to be the first to apply, and it just so happens to be us. The application includes a small single-storey extension at the entrance level, which the officers agree is acceptable, and we thank them for their agreement to that element. And then the first floor addition above the garage to create an office, which does not project forward of the original footprint. The ability to work from home will reduce the cost burden on my small business, which I currently run from an office in Tavistock Town Centre. The officer raised concerns about the impact of the street scene, but the street scene is not uniform. The report suggests that this part of Churchill Road is highly uniform and cohesive, but the reality is quite different. So on our side of the road, the picture on the left, you can see that our next door but one has a much higher roof line than our immediate neighbour, number 20, who support our application. There are clear differences in roof height and form. And then the picture on the left shows some properties in St Andrews Road, which is a small cul-de-sac adjoining Churchill Road, where there is a much taller property next to 2 properties the same design as 22 Churchill Road. Next slide, please. So opposite our property, the 2 houses shown are very different in size, scale, and architectural style. One of the houses on the left is directly opposite ours, and they support our application. There is no consistent or uniform building form at this end of the road, and visually our proposal is less prominent than some of the existing properties nearby, and it balances out the ugly and dominant garage, therefore actually improving the street scene. Next slide, please. So it's also important to note that under permitted development, we could build a significantly larger extension without going through planning. We do not need that amount of space, and this approach represents a more measured, controlled, and thoughtfully designed approach. In summary, this is a modest extension for a family home. It reflects the existing variation in the street rather than disrupting it. It has no technical objections and strong local support, and we respectfully ask that the committee approve this application, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much. Perfect timing. Any questions, please, for
Anna?
Not directly for the applicant, Chair, more for the head of planning, please, to confirm PD rights and how that would be affected in this?
My understanding is that the PD rights are intact for the whole of the estate. They weren't removed from planning permission. Planning permission was originally granted in, I believe, the early mid-70s. So PD rights are there. I'd have to refresh my own memory of the circumstances around putting extensions on top. There's certainly the rules changed about 2 years ago that so you can put an entire story on top of single story, and I think 2 stories on top of 2 stories. But I'd have to refresh my mind on memory on that.
Thank you. Sorry, I directed again at officers. So the main concern is the impact of the extension on the street scene and the nature of it in regard to the host dwelling.
Thank you. Councillor Reid.
Chair, when you produce this slide, why is your development, or your application, not part of permitted development rights? Have you been told why it isn't?
Because we're only looking to extend part of, so under permitted development, you have to put a complete story on, or a complete 2 stories on, and we just want to put a partial extension on each, so we had to go through planning.
And what's your opinion of that particular controversy between those 2 arguments? I.e. having to put a complete one on rather than doing something more modest that is less intrusive to the landscape?
Well, it's more in keeping with the street scene and our budget, to be frank.
That part I understand.
I'm just looking at this, and I'd have to go back into it further. But my understanding of when you're putting a complete new story on, it's not an automatic yes, you can do it. It requires a prior notification to the authority, and some of the things the authority can look at is how does it look alongside the original house and the street scene. So it's not an automatic. You can put a story on top. It's like a lot of permitted development rights where it's my time exceeded now.
Not technically.
so it's not as straightforward as we can put a single story on. It does require a notification process to the council to enable that to happen, but the actual PD right is there.
Thank you. We have no registered speaker from the Town Council, but we have a ward member, and thank you. Thank you. Councillor Debo, would you like to remain there or come to the forefront?
Well, I've set my stand up here so that I can actually look at my laptop and speak. So hopefully everyone will be able to speak. We haven't been able to hear everybody clearly during this meeting, Chairman. Thank you.
You will have your 5 minutes, Councillor
Thank you.
Debo. Thank you.
I sincerely hope I don't take that long. For those viewing, why I called it in is I wish to call this planning application under the material planning reason of design and character. I consider the work would not be detrimental to the surrounding area, with the height only raising by less than a metre. Many other buildings have been adjusted with little or no impact on the street scene. I also think that this application is not on an inappropriate scale. I will add that I thank the officer for being diligent and noticing that he has given the reasons why he has called it in. Unfortunately, we have the democratic process of being able to bring these to committee, which I have. We have heard from the applicant, whom I've only just seen today. It will enable and benefit the family's health and well-being. They will be able to work from home. West Devon Borough Council has declared a climate emergency, and we also concentrate on reducing our carbon footprint. This to me ticks the boxes where a family can have a good family life, increase the well-being of their family life, and also be able to work. As Councillor Moody said, there's a conglomeration of designs. It's also written in the site description under my referral to committee. I firmly believe that this would not be of detriment to the area. So I will leave it at that, and I sincerely hope that the DM committee will be able to use common sense and empathy towards this applicant and grant permission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Sellis. Any members wish to question the ward member? Thank you. Well, that brings the end to the questions, and we are now still in debate. If there's anything else anybody wishes to ask before we go to a vote. Councillor Moody.
I'll go first. Thank you, Neil. There was a dead heat, that one. Chair, I appreciate the officer's input and the report, thorough report, and I understand the reasons for recommending refusal. And I have looked at the report, I've looked at the policies, and have considered them carefully. However, having looked at the plans and the street scene through the site visit, I've reached a different planning judgment. I find the proposal, it needs to be set within this 1970s setting of, as I mentioned before, a conglomeration of styles. I admit that there are 3 houses in a row, but I don't feel that the development would have a considerable impact on the street scene. And as I said before, the street scene contains a variety of house sizes, roof forms, building designs. Being built in the 1970s, it has concrete tiled roofs, rendered walls. It is not in a conservation area. There are no significant, there are utilitarian buildings design. They're very pleasant, and it's quite a pleasant street. However, I think Dev 20 asks us to consider whether development responds positively to the local context and whether it relates appropriately in scale, height and massing. And as the question was asked, that 3 doors down is a very large building with the front gable showing onto the road. And I think that this design would chime with that rather than disturb the street scene. I think it would improve the street scene. As I say, the 3 dwellings in a row, I find it difficult to see that they have any visual significance. And whilst the visual change of this development is considerably noticeable, planning policy doesn't stop change. And we have got to make a planning judgment. So for these reasons, I consider the proposal accords with the objectives of JLP Dev 20, and I'm therefore minded to support the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Moody. Councillor Jury, please.
Thank you, Chair. I have to say, I do broadly agree with Councillor Moody in terms of the street scene. I'm grateful to Mr. James for your report. I think it's a very thorough report, and I quite understand why you've come to the conclusion that you have, given the 3 houses in a row. And if the whole estate were of similar houses, I think I would be moved to accord with your view. But the whole estate is not. I also take the point about the ridgeline being a metre higher, but I think we've got to weigh up a number of things here. And to my mind, looking at the proposal, it seems to me that the property is not necessarily subservient, in my view, to the extension. I think it's a fairly modest extension to an existing dwelling, some of which you can't see obviously from the road, and maybe that's a feature that we need to think about. But in utilising matching materials, I think the proposal does maintain the existing character of the street, especially when you view it against the property that is, as Councillor Moody said, three doors down. And it's also not out of keeping with the mass and size of the property opposite. The accommodation is intended as ancillary space in the form of a home office, reflecting modern patterns of home working and reducing the need to travel, and supporting other policies within the NPPF and the Joint Local Plan. And in that sense, I think it supports the wider sustainability objectives of the local plan, whilst, in my view, not going outside of the design principles contained within Dev 20. Any visual change, I think, is outweighed by the social and environmental benefits from the improved home working accommodation that will be delivered. So, on balance, and having thought about this very carefully, I would be voting against the recommendation as it stands.
Thank you, Councillor Jury. Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. The Crescent Bath, world-renowned and protected by all sorts of planning policies and what have you, and rightly so. Most of suburban Britain is very higgledy-piggledy in terms of housing development. It's the nature of our country. I think that the narrow policy that's being used to refuse this seems to ignore the wider aspects that have been mentioned both by the applicant and the supporting councillors, Delis. And I would like to make it clear that I think in future, the planning department needs to look at all the policies and weight it against the climate change emergency. Climate change emergency is embedded in the name. If it's that important, surely considering the reduction in carbon footprint, etc., is more important than a roof being a metre higher next to a couple of other bungalows. I find that very hard to explain, and to the public out in the street, if I explain what's been said today, they would think, I think, they would support me in saying we refuse this.
Thank you. Is that the end of your remit? Thank you. Caroline? Councillor Mott, please.
Thank you, Chair. I can fully understand why my fellow members have come to the conclusions that they have. However, I do have to, in this instance, disagree with them. While I can appreciate that it can be seen as a modest extension, I do feel that it doesn't relate well to the rest of the property and to those either side of it. I do feel that there could have been a more sympathetic application put into the surrounding properties. I'm also struggling to understand where the climate benefits are arising from this, because I note there are no panels or other things put in place to help that. So I'm guessing that the only thing they can surmise is that the working from home would be a positive in that instance. However, that does fail to take into account, my apologies, I've just seen the panels on the top there. But given the construction materials, etc., I don't know that that's necessarily going to be outweighed. So in this instance, I do agree with the officer that I don't feel that the proposed extension relates well to the host property or with the properties either side of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mott. Councillor Cheadle.
It's interesting how a committee can look at an application and come to diametrically opposed views, but that's the way of life. I look at this one, I actually think the proposal enhances the look of the building rather than detracts from it. And so I note the officer's conclusions in his report. I think it is a degree of semantics about whether the extension is on top of an existing footprint or not. But I have sympathy with the applicant and what they're trying to achieve. And as I say, I think architecturally, it enhances the look of the building and in no way jars with other houses on the estate. So I shall be not supporting the officer's recommendation on this occasion.
Thank you, Councillor Cheadle. I think we can now move on and finish debate and to our decision. And I would like to ask those members to vote who are in support of the officer's recommendation. Okay. I would ask for a member to propose, and I will, I will propose that the officer's recommendation for refusal. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Thank you. I'd now like to ask the members to vote whether they are in support of the officer's recommendation for refusal.
One chair.
Thank you. Any proposers?
No, those against.
Those against?
It's 9, Chair.
Any abstentions? Thank you.
That's it.
Yeah. That proposal then has been refused, and we now need a further proposal going forward. Do I, Councillor Jury?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm prepared to give an alternative proposal that planning permission should be granted subject to the standard conditions as the committee considers that the proposal, when assessed as a whole, accords with the objectives for policies Dev 1 and Dev 20 of the Plymouth and South West Devon Joint Local Plan and policy SD1 of the Tavistock Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you, Councillor Jury.
Nat.
Thank you, Councillor Reid.
When you say the standard conditions, I think you said subject to the standard conditions. Could I respectfully suggest that's going to be time limit to start and completion in accordance with the approved plans, and that's probably. Bear with me a second. So time limit, approved plans, and the works undertaken in accordance with the recommendations set out in the ecology report that came with the application will be the three conditions that.
Thank you for your advice, Mr. Wire. I'd be very happy to incorporate that as you've suggested.
Thank you very much for those clarifications. Could we have a seconder for that proposal?
I've already seconded it.
You've already seconded?
Thank you, Chair.
Can we now go to the vote on this proposal, please? Those in favour, please show hands.
9, Chair.
Thank you. Those against? Thank you. I think we can say that that vote has been carried. That ends the debate and questions on the application. Undetermined applications. Any questions, please? Thank you, everybody. There are no appeals and anything further for this meeting. The head of planning would like to speak to the members at the end of this meeting, but we're now going to end the live stream meeting. Thank you. We just asked about that prior.